Hi, AJ. This is Ira. I'm recording here my voice feedback to your statement of belief, which I hope will be helpful as you move from this assignment to the Defining Good Argument in Digital Contexts essay. In essence, this recording is meant to help you think about the questions that you're already thinking about in interesting, good ways, in ways that are more deep and systematic, and to give you some directions you might find it useful to push yourself going forward. So, I think this is your bottom line here. When you start defining good argument, you say the most persuasive arguments are those that are logically sound and ethical. And a lot of what you have to say subsequently hinges on your desire to be persuaded by arguments that you take to be morally sound in some sense, and also logical. You talk about having facts to back up an argument and outweighing opposing sides, and you talk also about passion as an important part of good argument. Finally, you articulate listening as part of the story as well. And as you put it here, good argument requires all of these processes in order to be valid and successful in winning each argument. So, first off the bat, one of the things I hope you'll do going forward is take all of the different components of good argument and think a little bit more about how and why they all fit together. What relationship do they have? As you're doing that, I want to challenge you a little bit on a couple of the assertions here. Is it true that the most persuasive arguments in general are logically sound and ethical? I mean, if that were true, I'm not sure if we'd have an advertising industry. And I'm speaking for myself. I've certainly been persuaded more than once by arguments that were not particularly logically sound or even sometimes ethical. So I want you to be a little careful about identifying effectivity with ethicality, because they're often not aligned. And part of the goal of this assignment, the Defining Good Argument in Digital Context assignment, is to really be thinking about how you navigate the tension between those things for yourself. And that kind of comes back again when you talk about good argument requiring these processes in order to be valid and successful in winning each argument. And so I think I have a couple questions there. One is what you mean by winning an argument. So, and that gets to kind of my overarching question for this paper and for how you can move forward with this paper, from this paper, which is, what is argument for? Throughout this statement of belief, you talk about winning. That's perfectly a viable way of thinking about argument. It's not that you shouldn't. But if that is what you see as the purpose, then you should think through what that means. What does it mean to win an argument? Why do we want that? How are good arguments more likely to win? And if winning is what's most important, who cares about the rest of it? The ethics and logicality and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if you do care about those things, how do they relate to that purpose, that goal of winning, since, in fact, sometimes being more ethical is not likely to make an argument win? So I want to encourage you to think a little more systematically going forward about, just to be clear, this is not a criticism of the statement of belief. You did a perfectly fine job on the statement of belief. But this is thinking about how you can deepen your way of thinking about this going forward. And I want to encourage you to think a little bit about, ultimately, in your view, what argument is for, and use that thinking to help you talk about how all of these processes that you're interested in do and should fit together. Now, when you talk about being logical, I think it'd also be helpful to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be logical? What is a logical argument? How do we know which ones are logical and which ones are not? Likewise, when you talk about being able to weigh the facts of an argument, how do you weigh facts? How does a good argument present facts to be measured or weighed differently than a bad argument? If facts are important in decision making, which I certainly agree, and I think most people would, how does good argument attend to facts? How does bad argument attend to facts? What's the relationship between these things? Likewise, when you talk about passion, there's certainly lots of cases where people make very passionate arguments, and in fact, the response is not to draw people in, and instead it's to turn people off and alienate them. Sometimes it does draw people in, though. You're quite right that when it works well, it draws people in. It makes them want to listen to what you have to say. But plenty of times it doesn't. And so, how does good argument draw on passion? And how does bad argument not draw effectively on passion? Again, we want to try and get here at what's the distinction? If the goal is effective persuasion, if that's your highest good, i.e. winning, although we probably want to, push a little more to articulate what that all means. But if something like that is your highest good, that's fair enough. But what is it? How do good arguments become persuasive in their use of passion? Will bad arguments fail? Why? What does that look like? And then kind of going forward, talking about listening, we kind of are back with this idea of winning. It can help you counteract the opposing argument from the perfect attacking point. This is useful because it's got to be strategic, like a chess game where you're thinking multiple moves ahead, and listening to opposition helps you do that. That makes total sense to me. As one way of thinking about listening. It's not my way of listening, but I think it's a legitimate, reasonable way of thinking about what listening is for. But, and this is kind of my but, at the same time, I'm not sure how that fits with the other things. And so one of the things I hope you'll do going forward is really articulate how these different components of good argument fit together. What's the relationship between them? Which are more important? Why? How do they all relate to the overall goal of argument? So when you say weak arguments are those that lack in any section, certainly I think this is probably just not really true, right? This is, when you say if an argument, it would be nice if it were true, but in fact, often people do listen to arguments that that are not logical and not ethical, and even sometimes arguments we know are not logical or are not ethical. We still sometimes listen to them. So I want to kind of press you to think a little bit more about how arguments that don't necessarily do the things that you're saying sometimes are effective. And if that's the case, if that has any implications for how you want to define good argument in the overarching way. And I think that overarching thing is really what I want to kind of press you on going forward, which is just to get to the point of saying, here's how all these all fit together because here's what argument is for. Not to say that everybody agrees on that, but here's what you think we ought to agree on and why. So, as you're moving forward, I hope you'll reach out and make an appointment or come see me in office hours. And, I'm obviously happy to talk through all of this and all the rest of your thinking about the next paper. I hope these comments will be helpful as you move into the next paper. Again, they're not meant as a criticism of this. You did a good job on the statement of belief. You did exactly what I asked you to do here. these questions, kind of critical questions. I hope that, maybe as you're listening to them and looking back over this paper, thinking about the next, you maybe jot down a little bit some of your answers to those and use those to help you write that next, more fully theorized piece, which I look forward to reading and to talking with you about going forward. All right. Thanks a lot.